So let me formally welcome everyone to today's webinar. We are talking about returning to work with the fabulous Sue Woodall from Live Work Cancer. Before we launch into the webinar content, I just want to sincerely acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we are on. I'm streaming live from Whadjuk Noongar Boodja outside of Boorloo, Western Australia. And I know that Sue is in the East Coast. What country are you on, Sue?
Darrogland.
Thank you. So let's collectively offer our heartfelt honour to the elders of the past, the present, and the emerging generations. And let's open our minds and our hearts to learning and sharing together today with Sue, who has a wonderful combination of expertise and lived experience. Well, they're both forms of expertise, aren't they? The different ways of knowing that Sue brings to the cancer world are really quite powerful and quite useful, I think, to all of us. She has had a stellar career and has had some big jobs with lots of responsibility, big budgets, and all of that sort of thing. And she's dedicated her life since her own cancer experience to making workplaces more cancer kind and to supporting people when they've had their cancer experience to figure out what comes next, how they reconfigure their work life and from the inside and the outside. So I'm handing over to you, Sue. Take it away.
Great. Thanks, Chandrika. I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands that we are meeting. And for me, as I mentioned, the Darug people. Aboriginal land, it always was, and it always will be. So I'm really delighted to be able to spend a bit of time with a great audience from my home state, WA. So I'm a Kalgoorlie girl, and but haven't lived there for many years, and Sydney is my home. So I have a very big soft spot for Breast Cancer Care WA, and as I unfold a little bit about my journey, I'd heard about Breast Cancer Care WA from a colleague of mine that's now I'm in this new cancer network, and she speaks very highly of Breast Cancer Care WA. So I knew that I was in a good place in connecting with you all. If you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A, and Chandrika is going to keep an eye on that for me and make sure that anything that's really important that we talk about or discuss, as I go through the content that I'm going to share with you today, that she puts her hand up and on behalf of everyone and fires that question over to me. So we can do some questions throughout the session, but also at the end. So I'm going to share my screen and take us on a little bit of, I guess, an introduction as to what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and what does it mean in terms of the experience that I've had with both my work, but this intersection of work and cancer. And so, as all of us on the call that are experiencing cancer in one form or another, either just being diagnosed, in active treatment, in the recovery of whatever treatment we're having, living with incurable but treatable cancer, or in this other space where we seem to have finished the treatment. We don't know whether the cancer's still there, but we're just getting on with our life on the understanding that the medical teams are looking after our health needs by virtue of checking in new scans, etc. So all of that often gets called being a cancer survivor, including metastatic. Some people don't like that term. I'm not. I don't call myself a survivor. I say I've had cancer, and I'm still on treatment for that diagnosis. So my breast cancer was HER2 and estrogen receptor positive, and I was diagnosed just at the beginning of COVID, which was a bit problematic because we weren't able to have our friends and family around us in that hospital setting. But what was more concerning for me was the impact it had on my on not just my job and returning to work, but the impact it had on my career. Because I'm not the youngest person on this call, I'm sure, and so I was in my late 50s, and after being out of the office for gosh, must have been about 15 to 18 months, my boss, my manager, couldn't find a way back for me. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about his version of the experience, and I think that's important for our understanding of what it's like on the other side. So I was working in government, and it was a really great role. The long-term side effects, I knew, and I guess most of us know what chemotherapy does to our bodies, certainly in terms of sometimes we lose our hair, we certainly don't have good appetite, we have either weight gain or weight loss because of the things like steroids that we're on. So physically, I knew what would happen when I started my chemo after having a lumpectomy. But what I didn't realise were the long-term side effects, such as fatigue. Had no idea what fatigue was, other than, I feel a bit tired. That was my previous experience of being worn out. And then the other one was the change to my cognitive ability, and having been in a certain style of work, leading lots of people with lots of accountability, losing my marbles, so to speak, was pretty confronting. Anyway, after about 15 months or 18 months, I felt like I could start to plan out my return to work. And what I realised was that my workplace, although it was in government, they didn't have a return to work plan. They didn't have a template that I could fill out. And if they did, it's more than likely it was for a slip and trip at work as opposed to a chronic illness like cancer. So I developed my own return to work plan. Took me a lot of time, and it was well received, but it didn't actually secure my return to work. So that's the context of my lived experience with having cancer and it disrupting my career and my job. And so as I started to feel like I could actually think, I could get the recycling in the right bins, I could sit down and do a jigsaw puzzle without sort of needing to go and have a rest. I could fill out my insurance form because I was on income protection. So I could sense that it was ready for me to go. I was ready to go back. When that door closed, that's when I felt amazing grief, a real sense of loss, anger, and that stimulated me to think about, well, what do I do now? And the answer to that didn't happen overnight. It happened over a long period of time, months. And in the end, I decided that, having read some of the research, I realised that my experience wasn't unique. And of course, I felt it was initially. How could somebody lose their job because they had cancer? But then I realised that if I had been my boss, what would I have done? How would I have supported Sue to go back to work? And then I realised that our workplaces are not set up, many of them are not set up to get us back to work, not just getting back to the job, but getting us back in sustainable, empowering, energised, confident work. And so that's why I set up Live Work Cancer. So today I've experienced amazing growth, personal growth. I'm using skills that I learned in my corporate world and my experience with cancer to come together to help workplaces and people that are navigating cancer and work to have meaningful, purposeful work. I mentioned my boss's experience. So our relationship was really good when we started, but it had eroded over the time that I was away from work, and it certainly deteriorated very quickly when he said that there really wasn't a place for me back at the office. So I asked him and said, so what was your experience looking after me or taking care of me or supporting me during my experience? And I just want to share a little bit about that with you because a lot of what he said, I also felt. So we were very close in terms of our personal experience with one situation. So Phil said that our relationship was tested, and I can absolutely confirm that it was tested. He lacked awareness around my experience, what I was going to experience. He had no idea how long and difficult my experience was going to be. And that's really interesting because further conversations with him, his he was really blindsided or biased towards two experiences with breast cancer that he had had. Family and a friend had breast cancer, and they had a completely different treatment regime, surgery, and an aromatase or inhibitor or something like that. They didn't have chemotherapy, didn't have radiotherapy, didn't have some of the other drugs that I've had because of the HER2 component of my diagnosis. Um, he found it really difficult to balance my needs against the needs of the business, um, and he just couldn't find a way back for me. I couldn't find a way back for me either because I knew that any adjustments that they were going to provide were not going to be sufficient to see me through the long term. And what was really interesting, apart from being angry with the fact that I lost my position and my identity and my purpose, because work was really a key part of who I was, I also looked at the income side and the expenses that I'd incurred as part of my the first 2 years of my treatment. And my loss of my income, even though I had income protection, was 5 times greater than my out-of-pocket expenses. And as a sole income earner for the family, I was really fortunate that I had income protection. And even with that, it was a real financial impost. So I wonder what impact cancer's had on you, and if anyone wants to share their experience or put a question in the chat, we'll just have a bit of a break before we go on to some of the other learnings. Okay, well let's come back to the presentation, and
I can see Sarah's hand is up.
okay, Sarah.
I'm not sure in the way that the webinar is set up, Sue, whether people can unmute. I don't think they can.
Oh, I see.
I
Okay.
think it will
So they
need
need
to
to
be
put it in the
comments
chat.
in the Q&A or the chat.
Okay.
The Q&A everyone will be able to use. The chat will depend.
Okay. So yeah, Sarah, if you can put your question in the Q&A section. Hopefully that's easy to find.
She says, I'll type, but don't wait.
Okay, all right. And Chandrika, when I've got my when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see your hand, so you might need to just interject.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So let me just get back into here. Oh dear. A minute. So a little bit about cancer. So I support anyone with cancer. Obviously, breast cancer is very close to me because of my personal experience. But any type of cancer will have or can have an impact on work, and it's um it's a it's a big burden on the Australian society. And 165,000 people are diagnosed with some sort of cancer every year. And what I found quite interesting when I first started to think about work and cancer is that there's a very large percentage, over 40%, and it's probably closer to 45, when you aggregate the aging population, the fact that younger people are being diagnosed with cancer, and particularly breast cancer, and we're surviving, which is really great news because the medication and the treatments are getting better. But 40+% of us are of working age. So this intersection of work and cancer is a really important topic, not just for us, people that have been diagnosed with cancer, but our workplaces, our families. We need to get people to start the discussion around how the treatment, the recovery, and our expectations of work change potentially because of our cancer. So why is work important? It's not one size fits all. My work was really important because that's where I'd invested 40 years. That's that's what I knew. I had a pretty simple life. I wasn't sort of wasn't climbing Mount Everest. I wasn't doing anything, exceptional. I used to go to work. I worked hard um, to do the best I could possibly do in every role I had. Um, it was definitely for financial security and purpose, and a sense of a connectedness with people. And that connectedness is one of my strengths. Um, and so being isolated because of my cancer experience has not been easy. So the reason each of you work will be different, but it's important to understand why work is important, and then ensuring that as we go back into work or as we're preparing to work while we're having our treatment or while we're recovering, that we stay focused on the reason we are working and balance that against the impact on our health, the impact on self, the impact on our family. And so one of the things that I have, I guess, rebalanced was work was, I had control over my day. I had control over what I did. And I had a choice as to what projects I did, how I was leading the team, etc. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I didn't have any control. I didn't have any choice. Sure, I had a choice of what treatment, in dialogue with my medical teams. But once I'd said that's the treatment I'm going to have, then how it happens. Basically, we're on a little bit of a fast train. The train leaves the station, and that's the destination we're going to. So we lose a little bit of the control we had when we left work and started our cancer experience. Some of the common challenges around work, and I don't know whether this resonates with a few of you, but this is, we could fill the whole page with some of the common challenges. But what I hear is the decision around who should I tell? Should I just tell my manager or the HR person, or should I tell family? Should I tell my colleagues? These are big decisions when you've been diagnosed with cancer. You don't want necessarily to have some sympathy. You want some empathy and compassion, but you don't want people to talk about you when you're not there. So deciding, whether to tell people is an important decision. And if we don't tell our workplace, it's going to be more difficult for them to respond to our health and our well-being needs. I hear that people don't disclose because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't ask for things because oh, it's Sue's asking for some more. She doesn't want to work from the office anymore because she doesn't want to come in. She says she's tired or fatigued, but I guess we're all tired, aren't we? We're all busy. Why should we, make some accommodations for her? So that sense of I really just want to continue with my job or continue with the situation, not ask for anything. That's a common response. One of the other comments I hear is one that's very personal for me, because people would say when I did get on the phone call or on a Zoom call with my boss or the head of HR or even a colleague, their first comment was, "You look great." That comment is meant to be it meant to be encouraging, meant to be something nice that they're saying to us. But it's not often that we feel well, we feel great when somebody the first comment that they make is "you look great." So they don't have an appreciation for the fact that we're coming to this Zoom call, we're smiling, we've done our hair, we've probably got a nice top on because otherwise we're just having our pajamas. We've made an effort to front up to the call or to the conversation in a way where it's the best we can do. We have we've tried. But then to be disempowered by saying you look great when you're really feeling unwell isn't helpful in terms of opening up the conversation.
So there's a
And
couple of comments coming
yeah,
in
great.
supporting that experience. One person says, "Ha, yes, finding myself very triggered the last few weeks when people say I look great." And then the longer comment that Sarah took a little time to type to us or to you is that she wanted to just share that she's returned to work full time with stage 4 triple positive. She says her employer's been flexible, had a reasonable return to work policy, but it was very much like a process for a strained back. So it's similar to what you experienced.
Mm,
She said she's led teams for many years and was generally oblivious to what would be needed from an ongoing cancer
mm,
diagnosis. Returned to work after early stage very quickly with a good outcome, but 10 years later had a recurrence. She says she does have limitations on her working schedule and location because of treatment and the countries that her team works across. And this, I think, speaks to some of what you were just saying about asking for help. She
mm.
says, I think, in inverted commas, that people are frustrated but don't say anything directly to me. Or I could also be putting that on myself.
Yeah. Yes, because you don't know what they're not, there's this open conversation that's not happening. Or I guess maybe it's a sense of um, are they really telling me what they're thinking, or are they um, saying one thing to me and when they're talking to others in the group or in functional support areas like HR, what is that conversation? Um, and the experience that I've heard often is when a manager changes, the whole regime of support, compassion can change either positively or not so. So it's not even when we get back to work, that's not the miles. It is, I guess it's a milestone, but it's not the milestone. It's not the end of the subject. It's not the end of the end of our needs. But yeah, workplaces, um, uh, I guess at the top level, it's a workplace that has the right policies and the culture, but then it gets down to how the individual manager and the person with cancer, how that relationship is navigated. Um, and managers need help because, yeah, Phil, my boss, had never managed I mean, he's a little bit younger than me, but he was certainly 30 years experience in leadership, and he hadn't managed somebody um, uh, where he had to make some accommodations. So Sarah, yeah, I hear that. It's good that the support's there. It's about the continuum of the support, and as your needs change, being confident and yeah, being confident that your needs will be met. But I found, I mean, I didn't even get back to work, but I found it really burdensome. I found the conversations I had to I had to describe in great detail to even get a sense of empathy about what my situation. And we need to educate our workplaces about what cancer journeys look like and the myriad of different experiences that we have. Anyone else wanting to share their experience uh, or thoughts on some of the common challenges?
There is some typing going on.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's like uh, there's a level of uncertainty is a challenge. Some of the people that I've connected now in my new network, I don't do procurement anymore. So I've just sort of reinvented a new network that's supportive of me and supportive of what I'm doing, and I feel like I could share anything with them. And if I can't share everything with them, then they're not really part of my network, to be honest. But that uncertainty, particularly as we're either going back to work or contemplating going back to work, we have this uncertainty around obviously sometimes our confidence, our capacity, how much can I actually do, and our capability. Has our capability to do the work or even to do a job back in that workplace, how has that changed, and how would I describe that to my workplace? So uncertainty is a really big factor.
Yeah, Sarah responded to thank you for your support and the things that you've said in response to her comment. She says she's been very open about her diagnosis, but as people see me back at work and looking well, people seem to have moved on.
Yeah, they have. Yes. And then that's a barrier, isn't it? Or a potential barrier, because they think that it's all over now. It's my legs was broken. It's been in plaster. The plaster's off. I'm doing a bit of physio, and I can walk again. So, I might be limping a bit because it's a bit painful, but it's very visible because of the invisible nature of uh, what happens to our bodies through cancer, and not just the short term but the long term. Our hair grows back and people think we're okay again. It's not easy, and I guess this is where recognition that somebody with a chronic illness like cancer may be able to get back to work and do what they were doing, but the I don't like using the word journey, but the experience will not be linear. It's not like we get to a stage and it's all plateaued. We're going to have ups and downs. It could be our mental health. We're got anxiety about our scans, or somebody else in our network's been diagnosed with the same or similar cancer or different cancer, and we're dealing with that on top of our own um, awareness of our mortality, awareness of the impact cancer's had on our lives. So it's yeah, I guess it's keeping the conversation going um, in a trusting and open relationship. And encouraging the workplace to find better ways to support people with cancer. And that's a bold statement. And maybe our experiences when we are back at work, we can be a voice, we can be an advocate for change, using our experiences as a guide for how things can be better for the next person with cancer. Okay, so that's some of the challenges. I'm just conscious of time. We're halfway through. So there, I guess the uh, opportunity to explore, well, what do we do about some of these challenges? Um, it's very varied because the challenges for one person, exactly the same cancer diagnosis, breast cancer diagnosis, will have a different treatment. The treatment will impact our bodies differently, our families differently, our lives, our work differently. So there's not one size fits all in terms of um, how do we think about I guess, managing or confronting some of these challenges. But what I have learned and what I've read a lot about are some of the tips that we can think about to help us through this experience. So I'm going to share with you um, top 10 tips, and then I'm going to drill down into 3 specific ones. So the top tips. The first 3 are ones that I thought we would unpack today. However, if there's something else on this list that you think, hey, I really want to drill down into that, then put your hand up or write in the Q&A. Oh, can we explore this particular one? But I thought we'd start off with self-care, setting boundaries, and realistic expectations. The next one I think that's really important is opening up our lens around asking for reasonable adjustments. And this goes beyond how many days a week we're going to work, or how many days, how many hours a day we can work, or even whether we're working from home or whether we have to go into the office. Those 3 adjustments are the most common adjustments that are made. And I encourage us to think about other areas that we can reasonably ask for changes to get us not just back to work or work through our cancer treatment and recovery, but get us to a place where we're back to doing the work we want for the purposes that we work. It's sustainable. It's not like getting back to work and then burning out, or getting back to work and then finding that it's a train wreck. It's not good for my health. I'm over committing to work and not looking after myself. So we're going to talk a little bit about those reasonable adjustments. And the last one I wanted to make sure of is that we understand what our rights are, and we are covered. Organisations can't just uh, make us redundant, or terminate our contract, or say no to what's reasonable. I think I saw a hand pop up.
Yes, I just saw a question come through. Exactly that. So you might be about to answer it. Regarding reasonable adjustments,
Mhm.
are there any guidelines or is there law that guides what reasonable adjustments are and how they're implemented?
Okay. Now that's we're going to unpack. We're going to unpack the first. We're going to got the onion. We're going to take off the first layer or 2 on reasonable adjustments and the legislation. And I've got some particular slides that if we do get time, I'll share them with you, and you can also research it once you see where the information's come from. So yeah, we'll unpack the first couple of layers of that onion. So, in terms of self-care, when we decide that we're going to work, continue to work, or return to work, there's I guess, some things which will help us to make sure that the way that we describe what we can and can't do and what adjustments we need, at the centre of it needs to be our self-care. So before cancer, I mean, I worked crazy hours. I had multiple projects. I had ministers I needed to talk to, etc. Now, I knew that I didn't have the energy um, and also the confidence to be able to engage in a way that was the same or even close to what I was used to, what people were used to. What people saw of Sue was not what the way that I would be running up to work. I needed to spend time to heal, not just from the medication, but from the life experience that I'd had in the 18 months. We need to think about what inspires us, and do more of what inspires us than what we find as detracting from our health or detracting from ourself. Um, Thinking about self-care as not being a selfish thing, but actually it helps us to be the best we can. And it means that we need to put ourselves first, even when we're running up to work, put ourselves first so that we can actually do the best work at home or in a paid or voluntary work. We can do the very best because we have given ourselves time to relax, to do fun things, things which fill our cup, um, maybe deplete our cup, but at a slower rate than some of the obstacles or the triggers that would use up our energy um, in at twice or three times the speed as if we were doing it where we've got our self-care at the centre. And one of the lessons for me, and I'd be interested to see and hear what others have felt, but my cancer experience was the first time in my life, and I was in my late 50s, where I actually understood what listen to your body means. I mean, people used to say that, and I go, "Oh yeah, yeah, listen to your body. Yeah, okay, right, I got that." And that's as much as I would ever um, give that comment, awareness of my life. Um, but now I know what listen to my body is. I know that if I feel tired, um, I need to stop things, have a lie down, have a sleep, or just chill out, go for a walk around the streets of where I live, just to regain some energy that was depleted. I knew that if I had lots of this is even a year ago, if I had lots of these sorts of calls, lots of online FaceTime, Zoom calls, that it would deplete my energy very, very quickly. So then I had to adjust how many of these sort of calls I would do in a day. I found even having a cup of coffee, meeting a girlfriend or a friend from work and having a coffee, then I would come straight home because while gave me joy and it connected me with my with people that were important, it just it drained my energy much more quickly than if I was just in my own company doing something at my own pace.
Another question's come through, Sue,
Yep.
about when you're interviewing for jobs, if you're trying to go back into a new workplace, what can you say about why you were away from work for 18 months?
Good
And a
question.
second part to this question, also planning adjustments. If we're asked to work toward a goal, like start at a number of hours or days, then work towards 3 or 4 full days, how can I determine what the goal would be if I have no idea if I can reach it? Because the post-treatment symptoms can be ongoing.
Mm, okay. So, um, so plan. So the first question was just,
Remind you about being interviewed, the
yeah,
conversation in interviews
interview.
about why you were away from work for 18 months.
Yeah. So, firstly, you're under no obligation to disclose your absence from work, um, and you do not need to disclose your diagnosis. I would, and that this comes up often, and if I was writing my CV, I would be saying career break, basically a career break. Why you had that career break is not relevant to the employer. That time you had off was personal time, or you could say personal time away from the work routine, to rebuild my energy, to do some retraining, or whatever it is that you've done in addition to doing going through treatment and recovery. The In an interview, the same thing. I had some personal time off. It was important that I focused on myself and my family. Therefore, I took 18 months off. But I'm ready to come back to work for these reasons. The purpose of my work is this job is really interesting to me. It allows me to pick up on my career. It takes me in a different direction of my career, whatever the reason is. That purpose, so I talked about what the purpose is of work, really understanding why that job that you're applying for meets the criteria. It might be financial. Look, I was thinking that I could take a little bit more time off, or I wasn't expecting to take that much time off, but it's taken me a little while to get back into the recruiting network. So, and I really need this both financially and for my purpose, and whatever that is. So that's sort of the interview CV. But you do not need to disclose your diagnosis. In terms of planning your adjustments, I think this is, we might go straight to tip number 2, because I think this will answer the question. I guess the second part of the question was, how do I work out how many days a week or how many hours I can work? The I guess you could say advice, or from my experience, take your worst day, and if you could only work, or if you could only concentrate for 2 hours in that day, then that's your starting point. If the second day you were able to concentrate for 4 hours, don't be too confident, unless you have to, but try not to be too confident. Say, okay, well, I can do 4 hours, because you know that your worst day was you really could only concentrate for 2 hours. You're better off starting small, really gradually, really short hours, small number of days, because it's easier to go up, increase the hours, increase the days, than it is to go back. You set an expectation that you can work for 4 hours for 2 days, or 2 days a week, and then you're finding that at the end of those 2 days, you're really unwell. You're not able to cope with the other part of your life while you're doing that many hours. So I always encourage people to err on caution, err on small steps, and then ramp up from there, because and this is where these reasonable adjustments are so important. When we get fixated on how many hours a week we're going to work, or how many days a week we're going to work, the problem is it depends on what you're doing. So if your job is in call center work, or as my job was, lots of meetings, if I could have probably gone back to work sort of 2 or 3 days a week if I didn't have any meetings, and I didn't have to do any presentations. But because my job required me to do presentations and have lots of meetings, etc., then I started off with 2 days a week, and I think it was 4 hours a day from memory, because I had no idea what my level of competency was. I had no idea how my brain was going to work in that environment. I knew I knew the triggers, and that's what I incorporated in my return to work plan. And I do have a return to work plan framework, which I didn't put in here, but I can share it with Chandrika. And it goes through what was your treatment, what was the impact of your treatment, and how was the impact of that treatment likely to impact your work. And then from that, what are the things you're most worried about? Irrespective of the job, what are you worried about? And for me, it was setting expectations that I was coming back to work in the same way that I left my work. So I had to leave work. I still had my hair, I was pretty energized. I was dealing with everything pretty well. But once I started my chemotherapy and this, 18 months of treatment, I was a very different woman. I was a very different individual. And I had lost so much of what I'd learnt in the previous, decades of my work. So I called it as I saw it. And then if you get back and you find that it's too much, this is a conversation that you need to have right up front is this is only a draft. I need to meet with you every day or every week, Mr. Manager or Mrs. Manager, because I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. So having this open dialogue. I think there was a question, Chandrika.
Yes, so further to the interview question, and I can see how this is really tricky, that if you don't disclose your health situation in the interview, then how do you ask for adjustments when you're having difficult days? The questioner says, I'm concerned about the trust in the relationship.
Mm, mm. It is about the trust in the relationship. And so if it's a new job and you haven't disclosed it, then I think it's really important then to be very realistic, very conservative about what you commit to in accepting the job. So that might be that, look, I've got a health condition, and therefore I can't do, well, actually, you can just, well, you don't even need to say it's a health condition. I'm in the job description, it says I have to do this. I don't find that that's really my skill set. I don't find that that's, it's not my competency or it's something that I don't really want to do. Is that a core part of the job? If it's a core part of the job that you find you can't do, then that's not the right job for you. Um, I think if it's a new job that you're going into, it's going to be hard to rely on trust because it's a new relationship. If you're going back to your old workplace, then there's a chance that there'll be some underlying trust between you and the manager or the team, and it's about assessing that and having a conversation. When I say I need something, please believe me, I don't want to have to go and get a medical certificate to say I can't do this piece of work. What I'd like to have is a conversation about the fact that when I do that sort of work, it really makes me very tired. I feel that's not where my competency level is at the moment. I'm sure I'll get there, but it isn't today. So having this conversation's really up front is so important, be it a new job or or you're returning back to an old job or a different job in the same company. But you don't have to say because I've got peripheral neuropathy, I can't because of my breast cancer treatment, I can't write. What you can say though is, I've got peripheral neuropathy and I can't use a pen. And so I'll need some voice command tools where where it recognizes my voice, it can do the typing for me, or I can do typing, but I can't do writing. And if you put, and you sort of think, well, that's a lot to ask for the employer. But if somebody has RSI or somebody has a bad back, somebody breaks their arm, they're going to need that sort of uh, physical support. So the fact that you've had cancer and you've ended up with peripheral neuropathy It's no different to the needs of somebody else that comes in with a um, physical issue that needs to be addressed. I think one of the things with this is it's very individual. I mean, there's lots of different scenarios, and this is one of the things in this model. Um, on the left-hand side where we've got person-centered, it needs to be specifically for you in your circumstance. If you've had a really good boss when you left work to have your treatment and you come back and it's a new boss, your requirements or your reasonable adjustments will be different than if you've got a trusted working relationship with somebody, the person that you have been working with. You might ask for a little bit more from the person that you don't have a relationship with because you think you might need it. Whereas the person that you've got a trusted relationship with, potentially you can say, well, I won't ask for that now. You can sort of say, well, I might need that, but look, don't worry about it at the moment because you know that that person's going to be open-minded for when you come back and say, hey, actually, things aren't working that well. I'm finding it really stressful. I need to, reduce the number of meetings I'm going to, or I don't want to be, on a project that's such a high profile project because I don't feel confident. I don't think I'm ready to tackle some of the complexities of that complex project. So it's very hard to be really generic, and that's why this tool is really important. So just to orientate, and this you can have a copy of this, is thinking about, yes, how many days, how flexible, what sort of breaks you need, but what sort of activities are you going to do? Are they time bound? Are they essential? Like if you don't do it, does something fall off off the does something happen that's really negative and you'll be embarrassed or feeling uncertain about it in terms of your own competency? What sort of resources do you need? And this is where we can start talking about a job shadow, someone that can actually shadow you while you return to work or while you start to take on a new project while you're still doing your recovery or your treatment. Some additional administrative support, like because you're not going to be potentially not as fast as you used to be. I would have needed a bucket load of administrative support because I just slowed down entirely. The type of interactions, I've mentioned meetings and reporting structures, um, these impact your ability to do your job, to perform to the level that you were doing before you had your cancer treatment and that recovery process. Making sure that you're talking about your performance, the performance expectations. I made it really clear to my leader that I've changed. I'm not as fast. I'm not going to be your high performer when I come back. I might be in another year or two or three, but when I come back, it's going to be a different type of expectation that you need to have of me. Otherwise, that's going to, put extra stress on me about the fact that I'm failing to meet your expectations or the expectations of stakeholders. Ask for a coach. Coaches are really helpful to put your work experience, your life experience, and your own self-care, your self needs into perspective. And someone to talk to, someone that you can sort of offload with saying, gee, I think I've gone back too quickly, or I went back and then so much has changed that I can't trust this relationship anymore, whatever's happening. But having somebody that is independent of the organisation, but somebody that can help you, guide you through this experience. How am I going for time? I've got
We've got
5.
about 6 minutes or so, but actually,
Okay.
it's okay if you go a little over the
Okay.
hour.
All right.
I wondered about the legislation, and there was a question
Mm.
earlier about the legislation.
Yeah,
Is cancer treated like other disabilities?
it is. It is indeed. So This booklet is available from the Cancer Council, and it is a really high-level overview of your rights. And I've pulled this out so that if you don't want to have a look into some of the legislative detail, this is a pretty good summary of the minimum standards that employers have, and that is that cancer is considered a disability. It's not this disability um, that everyone has grown up with, our understanding of what a disability is, but cancer, has the same rights under Australian law as any other disability. And if you can't perform your work, they can't discriminate against you. So we're covered by the disability and non-discrimination laws. And it talks about reasonable adjustments. There are ways, I'll just turn the light on because I think it might be in the dark now. Sun's gone down here. So there are cases, particularly small businesses or mainly small businesses, micro businesses, where they, if it's going to be too expensive, it's going to be too disruptive to make those adjustments, then they can make a case that they don't have to provide those reasonable adjustments. But for the going in position is an organisation needs to provide reasonable adjustments, and they need to allow you to work flexibly. And what does flexibility mean? That's the conversation that needs to be, well, before the conversation needs to be thought about, and then a conversation needs to be had. But if there's a particular part of your job that you can't do, then they can refuse to make those changes. So if you're an air traffic controller and you can't be an air traffic controller because your cognition isn't sharp enough and it would cause risks to the business of you being at their console for as an air traffic controller, then they can refuse those changes. But one would expect an employer would try to make accommodations so that maybe you don't go back straight on as an air traffic controller, but you can do some administration, and then you've got a pathway to get back to the essential parts of your role. So I just want to share with you, these are the slides. I'm not going to go through it, but I've put the link at the bottom of these slides about the Disability Discrimination Act and what it says about the employer's obligations. So this is a Fair Work Act. Now, Fair Work also has an element of state-based legislation, and so each state will be slightly nuanced. This is the Fair Work Act summary, and it talks about it's unlawful for an employer to take adverse actions against an employee based on their disability. So not hiring them. So if you applied for a job and you felt that you didn't get the job because you had peripheral neuropathy, then that would be against the legislation. There's a question?
Yes, another really good comment and question. I'm a shift worker working in an organisation that offers 24-hour-a-day service. Would reasonable adjustment cover my inability to work night shifts that disrupt the sleep cycle, knowing that that can be a factor for increasing risk of recurrence? Is there anything in the legislation about that?
It's on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. So you'd need to say that you can't work night shift because this is the impact it has on me. So I want to, until for the next 6 months or next week or whatever, I want to be taken off the night shift roster because of this. And then start that conversation. If you need legal advice on any of this, the Cancer Council has a legal as pro bono legal support for you. So it's a matter of contacting them. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a counsellor. Um, I'm somebody with lived experience, and the legislation, um, the interpretation of each state-based regulation will be. I'd be getting myself into hot water if I was to provide any advice on it. But yes, the Cancer Council 13, 11, 20 is your first port of call. And I do know people that have reached out to them and they've explained the situation to a pro bono lawyer and got some advice from them. But I think the first thing to do really is to start the conversation, and prepare for that conversation. And one of the things, this supportive network, you've got Breast Cancer Care WA, an amazing group of specialists, people with experience in their space. Tapping into the team there is a first protocol. I do provide pro bono coaching, 3 sessions of coaching sessions to help people start to navigate this work cancer, work career space. I run network groups. They're all dial in. It's all via Zoom these days, and we run two sessions a month, one in the evening and one at lunchtime. So that's available to you. I can also go in and speak to your workplace, help your workplace to set up a better environment for people like yourself to be able to not just go back to work. That's a little tick in the box at best, but to actually go back to work, enjoy your work, live out your goals, live out your purpose, your work purpose, and to balance work, cancer, and the rest of your life in a really meaningful, um, enjoyable, joyful way. You've got your manager. Often organisations have EAPs or employment assistance programs. I'm not sure that any of them really have a lot of experience directly with cancer, but ask your employer whether that's available and whether that's going to be helpful, and your HR or your people and culture team. And then obviously Breast Cancer Care WA is the tumour specific group for you. But there's Breast Cancer and Network Australia, and McGrath as well. But you've got a great team in WA. I think you're ahead of lots of the other states in that regard. So we are a few minutes over time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And any other questions? How are we going, Chandrika?
I think we're going well. I can see some clapping little emoji things coming through. And was that a hand going up, or maybe it was another emoji? Oh, somebody's typing. So hang tight for a few minutes. It is fine. We set the meeting up so that it could go over the hour
Oh, that's good.
mark. Lots of thank you so much. Yes. And really, we do appreciate your work, Sue. It really, you've fit yourself into a gap that has always been there. And I think that it is quite tricky to navigate. So any support that can be offered is really helpful because as you've kind of unearthed today, it's not straightforward and it is
Mm.
very case dependent. And I think, yes, there is a request there for the return to work framework. So you
Hmm.
might have sent that to me before, but if you could send it to me again, what we'll do is send out the recording to everyone that registered because there were more people registered than who are actually here live at the moment with us. So we'll send that out to everyone that registered and we'll send your resource as well, if that's okay with you, Sue.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. And yeah, so to get in touch, speak to Sally and her team, or Chandrika. and they can make an introduction. You can also pop onto the website if you want to do it that way. But yeah, there's so much we can do with our workplaces. So I'd encourage you to think about whether, as part of your, your community, whether you can help the next person that's dealing with these sorts of issues, because they don't go away. Um, and yes, I've got my tambourine, and my trumpet, and my drum, um, and we'll keep beating it so that we do get. So we don't. I mean, one of the things I say to employers is, don't wait for the person to ask for things. Like, we're doing our breast cancer, for goodness sake, just give us a break and just come up and say, hey, I've been thinking about all the different things that we can do for you. So that sort of hexagon that I shared with you, that's what I take to them and say, think about not just bringing Sue back 2 days a week. Think about, okay, well, actually, she said that she's not really, her cognition isn't as great. We'll just take off all of those things where she's going to use a lot of data and having to speak to the minister. That is really helpful. We're making decisions, the big life decisions around, shall I have that treatment? Shall I go and have that scan? Shall I, and then to be having to be burdened with the fact that I need to ask for this, I need to ask for that. You know, that's where our workplaces can be so much more helpful. So
That
much
would
more
be
helpful.
nice if they took some of that decision fatigue away for
Yeah,
people. Yeah.
exactly. And rather than us opening up the conversation, because there's been a number of questions around, what do I ask for, or what should I say, rather than us having to think about that, the conversation gets started by the person that we're working with, in a really compassionate way, not just empathy, but compassion. And compassion, as Chandrika and I have been sharing our thoughts, compassion is where we've got a lot of empathy, which is more than sympathy, but we actually take a specific action. So getting the workplace to actually take that action to make it feel much more comfortable for us, so that we can do our treatment well, stay on our treatment plan, and get well, and live the best work life, career life, as well as our health and our families and everything else that's part of our life. So, all right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and your insight and your expertise, Sue. You and I can chat offline about the resources. Someone has requested a copy of the slides. We can turn them into a
Yes.
PDF if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
So we'll
Yeah.
send all of that out. Thank you, everyone who has joined us today. There are more webinars in the pipeline. So we've got a couple more nutrition webinars coming up. We've got a death literacy one with a panel for Dying to Know Day in August, and there'll be more. So thanks very much, Sue, and thanks everyone. See you
Yeah.
later.
Great resource. Have a great afternoon, evening. Take care.